Hello, everyone. My name is Alfonso, and I'm your host with the Florida Aviation Network. We are broadcasting free and in the clear from the terminal building at the Sebring Regional Airport in Sebring, Florida, during the U.S. Sport Aviation Expo 2017. Today, our guest is Dan Johnson. He is the publisher of ByDanJohnson.com and the president of LAMA, Light Aircraft Manufacturers Association. Dan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Diego. Wonderful to join you again.
It seems like it was just yesterday, huh?
Seems like it was just yesterday. It was a whole year.
Dan, I mean, I have a few notes here that we're going to go over and everything, but before we get into the meaty stuff, why don't you just explain to our audience what ByDanJohnson.com is all about?
Well, it's a website with reach into the social media as well, and it covers light sport aircraft, light kit aircraft, ultralight aircraft, and some of the new breed of general aviation aircraft that are coming from those companies. So I represent the entire line of aircraft we see out here on this field, and write about them in the form of news and video, and it seems to be pretty popular with people. We have a good reach around the United States, and about a third of our readers are outside the United States.
Wow, so it's a worldwide type of
Yep,
thing.
goes all over the place, and that follows the light sport aircraft, which are all over the world.
And which they're here to stay.
And they're here, yes. They're not going away.
They're not going away. Okay. Now, of course, you know, one of the hot things right now on the table is the basic med coming up, and how will that play into the LSA world?
Well, it's an interesting thing, you know, that was introduced 5 years ago and took that long to work its way through the governmental processes. And at the time, it was a body blow to the light sport aircraft market, which was only about 5 years old at the time. So it was a relative infant and kind of took a big hit.
Right.
People that were thinking about buying light sport because it was their option relative to the medical requirement suddenly backed away right then and there. 5 years, it turns out, before the rule became active.
Correct.
It's still not quite active yet, May 1st coming up. But that was when the worst damage occurred. Orders were canceled, sales were withdrawn, that sort of thing. Since then, it's established a new baseline, and I would say the industry is healthy. It's not growing rapidly in the United States, but then that's true of our entire economy. The rest of aviation or many businesses are still they're on an upward path, but it's a slow upward path. However, that's the U.S. picture. Around the world, light sport aircraft is doing quite well, and selling briskly in many different countries using the same standards that are used in this country to gain approval from the government officials that regulate such things. So now with Basic Med, as it's being generically called, coming out, the effect on this industry will not be so great, we don't think. And in fact, it's still the best deal for someone facing medical challenges. Because if you have a driver's license, and if you wake up in the morning and you feel good about yourself, go fly. Whereas if you want to do Basic Med, you've got a few hoops to jump through. They've reduced it a lot. That's great. It'll bring more people either back into aviation or into aviation. We applaud that.
Right.
But we don't think it's going to be the big negative that some people seem to think it's going to be for light sport. That's already over. I liken it to the stock market. When the stock market gets wind of any bad news anywhere, right away, prices go down a little bit. Stock prices go down a little bit. They price it in right away, is the way it's usually said. And then whether the news happens or doesn't happen the way they thought, the result is it was already priced in. So it can go back up if necessary or whatever the situation. And I think basically for light sport aircraft, Basic Med was priced in, if you will, 5 years ago.
Definitely. I myself, you know, I'm retired, but I only fly for pleasure. So I only need a third class medical. So this is a blessing for me. I
Absolutely.
don't have any uh, health issues. I'm a
Good
healthy
for that.
individual, but why spend extra money and going through all the, jumping through all those hoops when now with a reduced requirements I can enjoy the same thing.
That's right.
And go
It's
ahead.
similar. However, there's one little wrinkle in that. Because more than 10 years ago when light sport came out and the announcement of you only need a driver's license and declaring yourself healthy to go fly, many people, and you could not get denied. If you went and got a medical and were denied, now you had a problem.
Yes.
So people said, okay, I'm not going to go get a medical because I might get denied. I don't want to take that chance. I'm healthy, but I don't want to take that chance. So they didn't go get a medical. So now they've not had one for 10 years. Now, in order to participate in basic med, they've got to go get a regular FAA
correct.
medical first and then can exercise those privileges you mentioned. So we hope that won't be a problem for too many, but it will be a problem for some. And meanwhile, light sports still has the same advantage it always did. A driver's license, declare yourself healthy, go fly.
Correct. I just met a friend of mine here a little while ago who's diabetic, and he just told me, he says, this is he has to do one now. He says, this is the last test, special issuance, for a special issuance medical that I'm doing.
Yeah,
And-
great. Those can cost some money. The
Oh,
special issuances,
well,
eh?
this gentleman, he was a former student of mine, and he's been battling this for like 22 years.
Oh, wow.
And every year, you have to go. It's not
Right,
like
it's
us,
annual, right?
and it's costly.
It costs money. You may not get it right away, and yet the clock starts the moment you apply, so you may only get approved for 6, 8, or 9 months or whatever.
Exactly.
So it's nice that those folks will not have to face that because there's no evidence, as we've now found out, that having that third-class medical prevents very many
anything.
accidents. Hardly any. It's statistically insignificant.
Exactly.
So it's good that they finally did this. It's kind of a shame that it took 5 years for such a simple thing to go through, but that's the nature of the
Well,
beast we've got. So
yeah, I mean, and really, when you think about it, it's a drastic change. It affects a lot of people, and I think that's why sometimes it takes longer, actually without reason. But in this case, because I was, as you know, I was an FAA inspector, so I
Right.
was in the system, and I know when there's a change like this, they try to look at every angle and see.
Oh,
how
yeah,
everything
right.
is. So it takes some time, but finally it's here, and that's a good thing.
Well, I'll take one more bow on behalf of the light sport industry. It's unlikely this would have passed without the good results from light sport being flown safely without medicals.
Of course, and that's the history.
Right.
I don't think in the years that I was there, I ever investigated an LSA accident that I can remember.
There hasn't
So-
been very many, and,
Yeah.
and none that were attributable to medical reasons that could have been prevented by a third-class medical. There were a couple of medical reasons, I'm sure, but none that a third-class medical would have found. The irony of that whole medical is you're fine the day you see your doctor, but what happens a month later or 2 months later or 6 months later?
Right.
You don't get another inspection. So I'm glad they did what they did, and we welcome those people back into the
Oh, yes.
back into the fold.
The more, the merrier.
Absolutely.
You know what they say: flying is only good when you share it. You got to share the cockpit, and the more people you got in there, the better.
That's right.
So,
It's a good thing.
now, the one thing I noticed today, and I know you're very active out there, is like there have been some changes. The show layout, for instance, and the way things are outside. Could you elaborate a little bit on that?
Sure, that's right. 13th year of this now. The first 12 years were, I'm pointing back behind us here, that to the north on the ramp. Still on the ramp, but a good ways away from where we're at is where the whole show was set up. It was fine there. It worked well there and everything. But they have this big, beautiful building that we're in here. Why not use that and have give people access to the facilities in here and to some displays in here as well? And then form the show right out in front of this building. And it's in kind of a big racetrack, which is ironic since we're right next to a racetrack, but it makes for a nice flow of traffic for people to be able to walk around, see everything. And I like the layout. Now, where we were down on the other end is this new thing called the drone zone. That if you'd said that 3 years ago, everybody would have gone, "What are you talking about?" And today it's a whole new activity down there, and that's bringing more people out here to the airport. Apparently, it's being well received, and those people are not already airplane pilots, but
Right.
they're now being exposed to the thing that we enjoy.
Of course.
And we are being exposed to what they enjoy. All that's good in my mind. So congratulations to Mike Willingham, the airport manager, and Bev Glarner, the main person that put all this together. He says that they did a good job this year.
Sure. We were just talking before about the drones and stuff, and we put a program together in Lakeland about 3 or 4 months ago, and they came to really talk about the new regulations that the drones were going to be under, and the safety tips in operating drones, and I was shocked because I was not aware of how big of an industry this is already, as far as video productions and commercials and stuff. And the second individual, the second guest there, was that's what he does for a living, and he works all over the world, and he goes to Europe, South America, and all that. And then you're telling me, and I'd like you to kind of let our audience know about these little drones competitions indoors.
Yes, it's kind of an amazing thing. You think of, originally drones meant big military drones, almost full-size aircraft. Obviously, we know better than that now. They're all called quads sometimes, or quadcopters, or variations on that. Multiple helicopter-like looking things. Yeah. If you haven't seen one, I can't imagine. But anyway, that's a basic description. But now some of them are basically the size of your hand, or smaller. Right. And they can operate those indoors easily. And the pilots wear a VR, a virtual reality headset, and these little tiny drones have high-quality cameras on them. And so when the pilot wears this goggle, if you want to call it that, he's seeing what the aircraft is seeing. So it's like he's in this little drone, and they race in them. And they're doing this inside in facilities, not just out here at airports, but in restaurants and bars and stuff like that. They're having these competitions, and apparently this is becoming a new thing. And I didn't hear that part until I got here to this show. So it's that new, and that's very exciting. But you know what? They're still kind of flying. It's not the same as what we think of, but they're still flying.
Of course.
And some of them are going to want to check out larger aircraft. Some will be happy with that. Many people will be entertained by it.
We probably be buying tickets pretty soon to attend these
Who knows?
drone races. I mean. Never know, outdoor and indoor,
That's right.
that type of thing.
It's a cool concept, and I'm glad they brought that into the picture here.
Now, also there is an item here that we would like to touch on, and that is the work with the FAA, your efforts with the FAA. Would you like to expand on that?
Sure. It's a good segue from drones, because if you think about drones and the ones that we classically think of, the ones that go up, like you said about the man you interviewed who photographs property for sale, or maybe a hotel site, or there's a lot of things. In fact, if you look at movies now, you can often, while watching a show on TV or in a movie, you can now go, okay, they got that shot by a drone, because you would never fly a helicopter where they did, or you couldn't. And in any event, you can do it for so much less money that drones are clearly moving into that space, and they're here to stay because of that reason alone. However, they can't do everything. For example, let's take just one example, and this is coming back to the question you asked. Pipeline patrols, or surveys of forests, or things like that, where the drone flies well out of sight. Once the drone leaves the sight of the person, it's a kind of a new game. It's possible to do. Sophisticated equipment, better technology will obviously enhance that, but people get nervous about one of these devices flying completely out of sight of the operator, even if the operator's got this equipment on and the rest of it. So there are certain kinds of activities that we believe that these light sport can do better than drones. For example, pipeline patrol of mile after mile after mile to see if there's any leaks or anything. And that's a thing that could be done with technology and drones, but is not yet. It's not ready for that yet. And our aircraft have a good applicability to that. The challenge is the regulation doesn't permit that. Right. The only commercial use you can make with a light sport aircraft today is flight instruction, towing of gliders, or rental.
Okay.
But those are clearly commercial operations already. So we are now approaching FAA and saying, look, if we can figure out the right way to do this, we know the regulations don't allow it, so it would have to be something called an exemption, and we would have to track that and keep some numbers, assemble some numbers for FAA so they can consider later on making regulatory change. But meanwhile, it gives an opportunity for the people that we represent through Light Aircraft Manufacturers Association to have another reason to sell airplanes to people. New
Exactly.
airplanes with special equipment on them. Very fuel efficient, very quiet, very long ranges, easy to fly in many conditions. They're good aircraft for some uses, and we're pleased to say that FAA is considering it. I won't say it's gone anywhere, and I don't know if it ever will, but at least they're listening.
Yes.
And we've come to the table with what we think are some fresh ideas, and they've acknowledged that this is different than the usual request. And so we're hopeful about that. And some other opportunities. For example, gyroplanes, which have become increasingly popular. There's many of them out here.
I just saw some out there. They're unbelievable.
Yeah, they're attractive. They're completely different than the old gyrocopters.
Yeah.
That's how the industry refers to them. Gyrocopter is actually a brand name, but the industry calls the old ones gyrocopters, the new ones gyroplanes, and they're quite different, and they're very nice little airplanes, but they're not allowed to be a special light sport aircraft.
Yep.
You can't sell one fully built yet. We're trying to break down that barrier as well. Again, with an exemption process, we'll collect some information, then we'll say, okay, after maybe 5 years, here's how it worked out, here was the safety record, would you now consider regulatory change? And that method seems to be also agreeable to FAA. The last initiative we have relates to electric power, which is also a growing thing. Technology needs to change for that to work on larger aircraft, but it works today on an ultralight aircraft. So we're trying to say, look, there has to be some way we can allow these people to do this so that they can experiment, so that we can learn more, and then that learning can be applied to other aircraft in the future if it's positive.
Exactly.
So those are the advocacy efforts that LAMA is trying to do, and we're pleased to have the support of the industry and the ear of FAA. Some people are being very kind to us in very high positions of at least listening to what we have to say, and we're grateful about that.
You were talking about the gyrocopters. My wife and I, we were walking out there yesterday, and we went over here to the left of the building. And I'm also an aviation mechanic. I'm not an engineer, but I'm a mechanic. And I was watching. They have one there that is completely naked. There's no covers of any kind.
No
it's just
fuselage on
the
it.
skeleton
Yeah, right,
and
right.
the thing. That's an amazing build. The way that thing is put together is like it's like a brick house, I mean, it's just very well put together. It looks really, really strong. I had no idea the size of it, number one, and to me, it appears, like I said, I'm not an engineer, but it looks like it's flawless.
Well, there's approximately 4,000, at least I would say 4,000. Those numbers are a couple of years old now. Gyroplanes, the modern ones, operating around the world, and their safety record is really quite good. The older ones, 30, 40 years ago, not so much.
Right.
And so it's good that we moved beyond that. But the big innovation, really, there's been many little innovations, but the big one is an actual tailplane behind the aircraft. And that has created a lot more stability to that aircraft and allowed them to do other things with it. And so they're really developing nicely, and it's an exciting field to watch take off, literally, as it does. So.
And I yesterday I was like impressed, very impressed with it. So. Okay, now let's go ahead and always the audience, when an individual like yourself, who's actually an expert in this field, in the LSA field, what I would like to ask, and I don't want to put you on the spot or anything like that, but what was that initial spark that said to Dan, I want to be a pilot? Can you go ahead and give us a little bit of a history on that?
Well, I had the interest a long time ago. When I was a child, I lived overseas in Saudi Arabia, of all places. But that company over there, which was the only thing going on there was oil, and it's still significantly what goes on in that country. And I was allowed up in the front seat of a DC-3 as a 9-year-old kid.
Oh, my God.
And the guy let me, because it was not in American airspace, he could let me do whatever he wanted, basically. They had kind of free reign. And he let me move the wheel a little bit, and I thought that was pretty cool. And we were above clouds, and I could see them very well, and I thought, this is an interesting place to be.
That's right.
Well, some years went by, and I was in high school at the time, and my parents, my father had a brother whose son, my cousin, was taking flying lessons, and my dad thought that'd be an interesting thing for my son to do. Got me involved with that, and paid for 10 lessons, And I said, this is pretty cool. I want some more money for some more lessons. He says, how about a job? I got a job, and ever since then, I've all the money I've had. I went into aviation, just like almost everybody here, I suspect. But it's been a great career. I've enjoyed it a lot. It's been a long time. And I finally found my way into this recreational sector, and I've kind of made it my home.
Yeah, that's what was going to be my next question. What made you jump the fence, going right into LSA?
Well, I didn't jump the fence.
Well,
I was hoping for an airline job at one point. I mean, every young pilot probably at least thinks about that if he doesn't really aspire to it, or she. And at the time, it was looking pretty good. And as it turned out, my roommate freshman year at college, his father was vice president of operations for TWA. I mean, talk about a great connection.
Ooh, that is.
So I talked to his dad and I said, hey, I've got X number of hours now, and I'd like to come and talk to you about a job someday. And he says, well, get to 1,000 hours and come and see us, and we'll talk. And that was lower than their barrier at the time, but he was trying to help me out. I saw him at his son's wedding a few months later. And he says, Dan, I'm sorry, I got some bad, because I said, hey, I've got 950 hours there. I'm almost there. I was doing flight instruction at the time. And he says, I got some bad news. We just had to furlough 600 pilots with a contractual obligation to hire them back first when we restart. And he said, it could be years now. And I went, well, I was a young guy. I didn't want to wait years. So I decided to venture into running a business in aviation. And hang gliding came along about that time.
Yes, I remember.
And I dove into that, literally and figuratively. And kind of never looked back. So the airlines lost a good pilot, perhaps, but I had a good time. So
that's right. Actually, when you mentioned hang gliding, there was a place in New York that was really famous for, and it's my neck of the woods. I mean, and that's where I first saw hang gliding taking place. It's
Ellenville?
No, it's north of Stewart Air Force Base. You know, right by the Hudson. I'm trying to think. I think it starts with a K, the name of the place. Anyway, it's some ridges, it's some, not mountains, but, big hills, I would say. And it was very favorable for that. And
if it faces into the wind, it's a soaring site.
Exactly. And it was very, 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 I was kind of shocked, the first time I saw a hang glide up close. And I was in an airplane. And the sight was was unbelievable. But they did a lot of not only hang gliding but also regular gliding, and
sailplanes, yeah.
And sailplanes. So I guess the last question I'm going to ask you is, where do you see the future of the LSA going as of now, with all these things that you have been talking about? Of course, all these things are complementing the existence of the LSA, but where do you see the LSA going in, say, in the next 5 years?
Well, the pace of development actually continues. In only 12 years' time, there has been 143 models of aircraft that gained approval. That's a stunning number that you can't compare to any time in history, even during war times when they built a lot of airplanes and stuff, not in total volumes of airplanes, but in the number of different models and every kind under the sun. That's not changing. The pace has slowed a little bit because many of the easy ideas have now been done, and now they're getting a little more complicated. But kind of the new thing on the horizon right now is light sport aircraft seaplanes, in which, for example, the Icon A5 is very popular, but there's some other very interesting airplanes with some high states of technology to them, and I think these are going to advance things that much further. That and things like gyroplanes and the other aircraft that we have, there's so many different types that if you can't find something to like there, you just haven't looked long enough.
Right.
And it's a global phenomenon, as I said. I know Americans typically don't pay a lot of attention to what happens in the rest of the world. America is dominant in light aircraft, no question. But in this light sport and light sport-like airplanes, it's become very, very large. More than 60,000 of these are flying around the world now. Most of those have come to the market in the last 10 or 15 years. So that's quite a development, and the pace is faster than with general aviation airplanes now. So when a manufacturer here makes an airplane, he can go to other countries right away and with not too much effort gain approval and can sell into that country.
Exactly.
That's an enormous change, and I think that is just continuing to develop, as evidenced by countries like China that are now beginning to embrace it with their immense population showing interest in these kind of aircraft. These are the starting point. You don't start with a Cirrus or something.
Okay, Dan. Again, time has gone real quick.
It flies by with you,
And
Diego.
I'm
Thank you so
telling
much.
And we've gotten to the end of the show, and I want to thank you for being here with us with that great information about SA. And like I say, they're here to stay.
Absolutely.
And I hope you have a great weekend at the show.
Well, I hope you're here to stay as well, too. We'll look forward to doing this with you again sometime.
And you, our viewers out there in cyberspace, this is Diego Alfonso signing off with the Florida Aviation Network.